Hello, everyone. And we are here between two teachers. And this is our Sunday, September 19th. We're kind of moving around on the in the week because we're pretty busy. There's so much happening. But we definitely want to share with you what's going on in the country and the counties and the district all over and bring you best practices in education. So my name is Consuelo Lara.
And I'm Madeline Cronenberg. And we begin, as always, with our land acknowledgement. We pause to acknowledge that we have gathered on the ancestral territory of Huichin, which is part of the unceded land of the Chochenyo and Karkan-speaking Muwekma Ohlone people. We remember their continued connection to this region and give thanks to them for allowing us to live, work, learn, and pray on their traditional homeland, and offer our respect to their elders and all Ohlone people of the past and present. And welcome again to where we are today in education. And today we are still, of course, dealing with COVID. COVID has not gone away, and COVID has sort of is the overarching theme of everything in education in the United States. And I just was going to point out a couple of things that are happening nationwide. One of them is this trend among families. Now we're looking at vaccinations, vaccination mandates. The president came out with a vaccination mandate for employees there and the federal employees. There's also various states that are approaching it differently. In New York City, the consequences of a vaccination mandate is that those who don't want to be vaccinated for whatever reason, and it breaks down all sorts of different ways. But in New York City, there's going to be a strike by them because what they want to have happen, the student, and it's run by students who are worried about school safety, and what they are striking for is what they call a remote option, a virtual school, right? An online distance learning presence, because those folks, those families that don't want their children to go back into the building, and this is really led by high school students in New York City. What happened in California and in other states is that in order to be sure that schools would reopen, the virtual options were limited. And they were limited in all sorts of different ways in order to be sure that people would know that the school sites would be physically reopened, so that businesses could reopen and everybody could come back. That was the thinking. Now, the pushback on that is that for the folks that want their virtual options to stay, and that's a higher number than a lot of these public agencies anticipated. So it's playing out across the country in different ways, but really the big impact, the thing that's coming here is that people are saying, some of them are saying they want to strike until a remote option is offered, a more robust remote option is offered in New York City. All of this has been problematic across the country. There have been school board members, the head of the Clark County, Nevada School Board, she's in Las Vegas, has been receiving death threats and has to have a security detail, right? Because, and it's because of masking and vaccination.
Yep.
Board meetings have, had fights all across the country. There was a big fight at the and a meeting was shut down in Yosemite. The Yosemite School Board District had a meeting that had to be shut down because of the how violent the meeting became.
Yeah.
So it's a big issue that people didn't anticipate, and they're really not clear how to handle.
Yeah. It reminds me, way back when, because I was teaching for a long time, before all of this, there was homeschooling, things like homeschooling. And so you did have parents or families that were against things that were happening in the public schools, or maybe they were against vaccinations or whatever. And so their option was, okay, homeschool. And, but independent study and the virtual academies, I think, are two different things. I mean, homeschooling, you're totally in charge of that at home. But the independent study virtual academy is still part of the public school. So everything has just made this so much more complicated. COVID,
Yeah.
and now the option of virtual, you know, so these are things still to be worked out about that. But you know, the mandating, just like a polio vaccines or any of the others, that we really need to take care of our kids' health, you know, and
It's not new. Mandating is not new. I mean, people don't talk about this, but to me, the thing that it's closest to is you have to take a TB test to teach.
Yes, there you go.
And if you do not pass the TB test, you could be the greatest teacher in the world.
Yep.
Now you could go into virtual learning, I guess. This is an opportunity for you to do that if you're in that circumstance. But you can't go into a classroom.
Yeah, exactly. You can't be around kids. That's it. That's true. So it's
and that's a law that nobody is out there saying anything about, right? And tuberculosis, I mean, COVID is a terminal illness. I mean, people die from tuberculosis, but they die from COVID. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And they're both very contagious. That is, I think, the closest example of what we are still having to do. And if you refuse as a teacher to take the TB test, there's no exemption.
No. You know, I mean, even as a teacher, even if you decide, okay, I'll teach remotely, I think you should still have to take it, because you still have to come in, you know, you're still communicating.
Right.
You still have to have contact with individuals in the district or.
Well, and that is the whole thing. So that's why the vaccine, the folks that are doing the vaccine mandates, the real vaccine mandates. So LAUSD, for example, now has a vaccine mandate. And the issue becomes the vaccine mandate for staff, for employees, and then the vaccine mandates for students, right? How that all is playing out across the United States.
Yeah.
And it really is a gigantic issue that people are struggling with. And I mean, we can bring it up now locally. We've struggled with it here.
Yeah.
And
it needs to be consistent, because the County Board of Supervisors, right? They have mandated it. And what are the consequences if you don't?
You're terminated.
That's it. So
that's it. I mean, unless you can prove have a doctor give you a medical exemption, or unless you can prove a religious exemption, and that really means that there are ways you can prove you're a member of a religious organization that has this kind of a position. If you can't do that, you're terminated.
Yeah. So if the county can do that, you know, we need to be consistent. We're under the same kind of obligation to do that, I believe.
Yeah, and the county. So in West Contra Costa, the county health department wrote a letter to the West Contra Costa School Board supporting the idea that this is supporting a vaccine mandate, just like they have at the county, saying that would be for students, right? We're talking about for staff and for students.
And for students.
And we had a board special board meeting called, and then the special board meeting was canceled. And it appears that the reason that it was canceled is that they need more opportunity to, in fact, create options for students and families that don't want the vaccine. Because this is the thing, you can terminate employees, but you obviously do not terminate students. So what you have to do is have options for those students. And in LA, where they have voted for the vaccine, they have also had 8 times as many students choose not to be vaccinated and instead enter into their remote option, their virtual academy. I think it's called School of the Angels. So they have 12,000 students enrolled in School of the Angels right now,
That's a
which is 8 times more than they had before COVID.
lot.
But they apparently, they were prepared to make that adjustment and expand that program. That's where you have to be. You have to be prepared to expand your program so that all students have something available to them within the district.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
So that's what everybody's doing. I mean, there was also a conversation around overall in the country, there are over 1 million students missing. And that really means to me they're being homeschooled,
Yeah.
right? If you're not enrolling them, they didn't disappear off the planet. What's happened is they've been diverted into a homeschool situation by families that feel very uncomfortable bringing them back into school buildings.
Yeah. 1 million that are not enrolled in.
Over 1 million.
Over 1 million. Okay.
And so it's not unique to any one area, but there are pockets. There are some areas that have very few children that didn't come back and some areas that have many.
Yeah. And it's such a, like you said, it's by race and ethnicity. When you look at those numbers, also look at, how it is racially. It's very significant.
When you disaggregate it, it all comes down to the same thing. When you go by education, socioeconomic status, and when you go by race, there is no question where it falls, right? And it's our lower income communities, it's our communities of color that have the highest impact here.
Yep.
And it is the communities of color that really are demanding a robust remote option.
Yeah.
Right? Because they are the ones who are most concerned about vaccinations. So that has to be addressed. That's this whole thing around equity. When you're talking about equity, we really have to, if we believe equity, we need to say, we're going to do that. We're going to, provide the strongest possible education for everybody in the way that they want to receive it.
Yeah, for sure. Very
Right?
good.
That's sort of where we are. So they've done an independent study. The CDE for California, the Department of Education, is addressing the independent study issue because what has happened is many of our school districts do not have a virtual academy. West Contra Costa does. That's a separate thing from independent study. And they had to come up with a way for students that are put into a quarantine status to still continue to be educated for the 2 weeks that they're in quarantine, right? So you can have a student who's had an exposure in the classroom. Your student is fine, but that they've had this exposure. How are they going to receive their education? And one way is through packets. Another way, and packets, of course, is nowhere near as useful as being able to be with your teacher and your friends and talk to them. And also, parents have gone back to work now. So if all of a sudden your child is quarantined, everyone has to readjust to see, well, where is this child physically going to be, right? It's a huge set of issues that are surrounding all of that. Anyway,
Okay.
all of that, and the CDE is looking at how they're defining and redefining independent study, what that actually needs to look like, because the needs are so different than they were.
Yes, everything's changed. We've got to, redefine.
The other thing that's changing is the besides there being the issue around, are we going to mandate vaccines and what does that look like? Marin County is piloting a program to give every family free at-home fast COVID tests.
Ooh, wow.
So there are many different ideas on how to do things. So that's one thing that's happening, and they're doing the at-home rapid test for symptomatic students. So if your child doesn't feel well, you can immediately test them, and then take a picture of the test and send it back to the school. That's what they're looking at as a possibility.
Okay.
They have a very high vaccine rate, Marin.
They do. They do. I know. So talk about best practices. I think that's a good one.
It is. I mean, this is what they are looking at is the clearest and fastest way to identify.
Yep.
Right. So most of their families and most of their staff at very high rates are already vaccinated. So what they're saying is, if your student is symptomatic, we've already given you the test. You can test them before they go into the classroom. Test them at home.
Another level of protection. Isn't that great? Oh,
That is a really strong level.
yes.
West Contra Costa has switched to its provider, and they also are going to rapid tests, but they're rapid tests at the school sites with a different provider called LSA. And so this is what everybody's doing, is they're seeing the providers are realizing what their own bandwidth is. And the original provider that they had didn't have the bandwidth that they had hoped they would have had to support all the testing, and the testing turned out to, either you get it right or you don't. There's no middle ground here on this testing. You either have to be able to provide the testing, provide the results quickly enough for them to be useful.
Yeah.
Or it's a waste of everybody's time.
Right. And we had in the Concilio, we had a teacher who represents the teacher union talk about just that. There's just so much inconsistency about what's really happening at the site levels with teachers and what the district kind of puts out there is happening. And I have to bring back that labor management organization that needs to sit down and talk. We need to bring back the solutions team so people are talking to each other, talk about best practices. And this is something that
exactly.
has
There are answers here. And the answer isn't that we should put all this energy into fighting with each other. The answer is we should work together to try different things, and different things will work in different communities. I mean, truthfully, the vaccine conversation plays out one way in some communities and it plays out a different way in other communities. The need for the virtual school, Culver City was the first school district to go with the mandating the vaccines. Culver City has an incredibly high vaccination rate already. So they didn't need to have a big conversation around independent study or virtual schools, because that need wasn't there for them.
That's right.
Right. So you can't just copy everybody. You just have to figure out, but you have to listen to your own community to see where you are.
Yeah, you got to have those conversations. Yeah, we're not going to be there. So we need to have our own unique solution here. But you got to talk about it first.
You do have to talk about it. You have to have meetings and have a conversation and talk about it. You need to, and also really recognize this is an equity issue.
Yes.
It absolutely is. And to think that it's not, the COVID is an equal opportunity virus. COVID will go after everybody, but how you respond to it has a lot of cultural overlays for folks. And that's where you have to, support people. That's what equity is supporting people as they need it.
Yes. Okay.
So anyway, there's all of that. And now I was going to talk about OUSD. Oakland is going ahead and having they had a meeting in West Contra Costa was canceled. They're going to have a board meeting on Wednesday, but their board meeting on Wednesday doesn't have any agenda items that address this specifically, although it may be in the superintendent's report. That has not been posted as of right now. So we don't know. And right now there are no agenda items at all that speak to action or discussion. So we're not sure what the superintendent's going to say. Oakland, on the other hand, has it on their agenda. So there will be movement there.
Okay.
Now you went to a conference. Why don't we hear about your?
Yes. So we had a conference for just county boards of education. I think in the past, the county people would just go to the school district board of education conference, and we still do, but this was one specifically for the county. And I thought it was very enlightening. There was a lot of good conversations and presentations, the emphasis on the social emotional mental health of our students and parents and teachers. You know, it's not just one group that's affected by especially what's going on right now with us. So
Right.
that, I thought that was really great. What I noticed overall, I'm always this big picture person. Out of the 12 or so workshops, 5 of them were on tech, whether it was computer science or artificial intelligence, or just, I mean, so, you know, this is on the forefront. We're with going virtual and with, you know, online schools. This is, you know, front and center, and equity when it comes to access, all of that. So, and then when I heard this one speaker say how the county offices have this power of convening, and there's so many issues we could do a convening. We could do a convening about equity technology, but also a convening on this vaccine, the COVID response. Because like you said, Madeline, the response is what's different everywhere. So what is ours for our county and how it differs in each district? Our districts are so different in this county.
Right.
So a convening on that would be so useful, I think, for everyone. So that's kind of something I'm hope to bring up. I intend to bring up for our county Board of Education. So that was one. And yeah, let me see what else. Yeah, that was the big one. That was the big one for us. And let's see, I don't know if we're going to talk about this a little later, but the Contra Costa, oh, we had the Concilio meeting also, and we had Dr. Robinson Cooper, and she came
Yes.
and spoke, and she's new there in that position, and it was just great to hear her background and her vision, her experience also. So, and we're gonna have her here and talk to
We're
her.
gonna request this. So this is our, here is our, we have not asked her yet, but we were hopeful that we'll get a chance to talk with her here. on
Yeah, we
June
haven't asked her yet.
No,
We
so
hope,
just
we
so you know that we haven't asked her yet. And if I tag her in this, we apologize for not asking you,
not asking you first.
but we were so impressed by you. We would hope that we would be able to speak with you some more publicly. And what was really, I thought impressive is her really a strategic intention to develop partnerships throughout the community in order to serve students K-14.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's a very important thing that has to happen.
Very good.
Uh,
Okay, what's next?
What was next? I was going to talk about, let's see. Oh, well, here, well, let's do updates. The big update, we talked about what's happened with vaccines. The other big update that happened last week is Gavin Newsom won and did not get recalled.
How about that? It was a landslide, pretty much, too.
It was a landslide. So we got past that. And then he signed a group of bills. The other thing that happened is last week, or since our last episode, is that something called the Education Freedom Act is now up to be qualified. And this is an issue around school. This is an issue that's going to go towards privatizing schools. These are the privatizers. So to be aware, education freedom is not what it sounds like. Education freedom is freedom to leave the public schools and take your money to private schools.
Gosh, they just don't
Not
get-
even just charter schools, it's private schools. So
Yeah.
this is, the diocese, anyone who runs a private school is going to be excited to get the Education Freedom Act passed. And it will dramatically diminish the funding available for public schools if it gets passed. But they do not stop. And so they have presented their letter to start an initiative to gather signatures for it. It's not approved yet, but the letter that went to the Sacramento, and letter has gone to Sacramento asking them to agree to the name Education Freedom Act, which is a terrible name. It should be the Education Defunding of Education Act, because that's what this really does. This is talking about defunding other parts of our our system. This is going to defund education, and it's done it in other states.
And
But
it's
that's-
passed in other states. Is that what you're
But
saying?
it's hurt them. It's hurt them very much in the other states.
So it's diverting public education funds into private schools. That's-
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what it is. That is it. This is the defund, divert public education money and support private schools. That's what this is. So we'll be talking about that for a long time, and I'm sure they'll get it, and they'll get some name for it, and they have the money to go out and put people out there to pass an initiative and probably get it on next year's ballot. So there's that. And then we'll just do our shout outs.
Mhm.
So I have an unusual shout out. A shout out to two people that I have not met, but I am big fans of, and they are out of Prince George's County, Maryland.
Mhm.
And it is Miss Janet Parker, young woman who ran for their statewide, to be a statewide delegate, and a photographer and author, Anthony Tilgman. And Miss Parker and Mr. Tilgman run something akin to Between Two Teachers, in the sense that it is an online YouTube presence where they do a recap of all the Prince George's County Public Schools meetings, which have their own level of controversy and many, many issues. They do a recap of the meeting, and then they also do an education roundtable discussion once a month on the last Wednesday of the month. They are very committed people, and they're just showing once again that members of the community have the opportunity to become involved and to make a difference. And I really am impressed by both Ms. Parker and Mr. Tilgman and how they run their meetings. And so I'll put links in. I share them out every month that once I've seen them. And in a controversial community where their district is very predominantly African-American, and it has 14 members on a complicated school board, half of whom are appointed, half of whom are elected, and then where there are differences of opinions and people where they have to have a parliamentarian who assists them in all of their meetings and wound up quitting in the middle of the last meeting. There are a lot of issues in their counties, but they are there to support them, and I am a big supporter of both of them.
Yeah, I like the idea of recap after the meeting is over, is the recap of the meeting. That's really good. That's really good idea. That's
So there are groups that might be willing to do that here too as well. Maybe Public Core would do that. I don't know.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. For a podcast or something, they'd be perfect. They're great because they do a recap, among themselves, among each other. And so,
Anyway, but and I'm sure there are other groups too, honestly. Go Public is another person that, another, and there are lots of others. It's just that it can be done, and
Yes.
it's a way to get.
need it. Yeah, we need that information. We need the discussion, the conversation. Yeah, it's a good tool.
And then you have your shout outs.
Yeah, I have a shout out to Malika Gray. She works as a receptionist assistant in CIS, Community in Schools at Richmond High. And with me and Genoveva Calloway, we have a girls group that we mentor. And she's just somebody that really puts it together for us and reaches out for them. I mean, she goes above and beyond, and I just am so grateful to her. So wanted to give a shout out to Malika. So that's my shout out.
That's a perfect shout out. So we will see you again. I'm not sure which day we're going to come together again this week, but we will, and we'll let you know what's going on in West Contra Costa and in education beyond West Contra Costa. See you all soon. Bye-bye.